And welcome! Today we're diving into one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, most misunderstood ideas of our time. We're going to tackle the big question: what is artificial intelligence, really? You know, our whole story really begins with us. For as long as we've been around, we've been absolutely fascinated by our own minds. I mean, how can this thing in our heads perceive, understand, and actually change the world? The entire field of AI is really just taking that fascination to the next level. It's an attempt not just to understand intelligence, but to go ahead and build it from scratch. But right away, that leads to a huge question. When we say we're building intelligence, what are we actually trying to create? And as it turns out, that answer is not nearly as simple as you might think. Yeah, see, there's no single clean definition of AI that everyone agrees on. Instead, it's probably better to think of the field as being organized around 4 different goals, or maybe 4 different flavors of what AI could even be. Okay, so let's break this down. You can pretty much map out the whole field based on the answers to 2 key questions. First, are we trying to mimic messy, complicated humans, or are we shooting for perfect, logical rationality? And second, do we care about what's happening on the inside, the thought process, or do we only care about the final behavior on the outside? And boom, this grid gives you 4 totally different goals for what AI is trying to do. And what's really cool is how this whole grid kind of boils down to 2 main philosophies. On one side, you have the quest to just imitate us, either by trying to model how we think or by just acting human enough to fool someone in the famous Turing test. But on the other side, the goal is totally different. It's simply to achieve the best possible outcome, period. This is the rationalist approach. And honestly, it's pretty much become the main way we think about modern AI. So where did all these big ideas even come from? AI might feel super new and cutting edge, but its roots, they go way, way back. It's not really a single invention so much as it is a recipe, combining ingredients that have been simmering for centuries. Okay, first ingredient, philosophy. I'm talking about thinkers like Aristotle, who were already asking if reasoning could just be a mechanical process. They were debating how a physical thing like a brain can create a non-physical thing like a mind. These are the ancient, fundamental questions that AI is still trying to answer today. Next up, you've got to add mathematics, which basically gave AI its entire toolkit. It gave us formal logic to represent facts and ideas. It gave us Alan Turing's incredible insights into what's even possible to compute. It helped us understand which problems are just too hard to solve efficiently. And crucially, it gave us probability theory, so we could reason about a world that's full of uncertainty. Then we sprinkle in some economics, which gave us the whole framework for making decisions. It brought in this core idea of an agent trying to make choices to maximize its utility, which is just a fancy way of saying to get the best possible outcome for itself. Economics also gave us things like game theory for figuring out what to do when other players are involved. And of course, you absolutely cannot talk about building an intelligence without looking at the original hardware, our brain. Neuroscience was essential. It established that this physical organ is where consciousness lives, and that tiny little neurons are the basic building blocks. The brain is the ultimate proof of concept. It shows us that a physical machine can, in fact, be intelligent. And finally, psychology, specifically cognitive psychology, gave us a super powerful model for how the mind might actually work. It gave us this view of the brain as an information processing machine. And it broke down the whole process into these 3 key steps. You get a stimulus from the world, you create an internal representation of it, you manipulate that representation, and then you turn it back into an action. Simple, but incredibly profound. Okay, so with all those ingredients finally in the mix, the field of AI was officially ready to be born. But its history, well, it hasn't been a smooth ride. It has been a wild, dramatic roller coaster of massive hype, crushing disappointments, and then some absolutely mind-blowing breakthroughs. So the field officially kicked off in 1956, and right out of the gate, the optimism was just off the charts, fueled by some really cool successes in games and problem solving. But that was quickly followed by the first AI winter, a time when reality hit hard and all the funding just dried up. The field came roaring back in the 80s with something called expert systems, and then again with the huge return of neural networks, which is basically what brings us to the modern era. And to really get a sense of that early, almost unbelievable optimism, just listen to this quote from Herbert Simon, one of the pioneers, all the way back in 1957. He wasn't just predicting a little progress. He was basically saying, "We're almost there, folks." The belief was that truly human-level AI was right around the corner. But, well, that incredible optimism ran headfirst into a brick wall. The first AI winter showed up, and the whole mood of the field just completely cratered. So why did all that hype just fizzle out? Well, it pretty much boiled down to three big problems. First, those early programs were super brittle. They didn't have any real-world common sense. Second, a lot of the problems they were trying to solve turned out to be intractable, meaning they got exponentially harder the bigger they got. And third, the AI models themselves were just too simple. They had real, fundamental limitations. And this right here is a perfect example of what they were trying to do back then. To make any progress at all, researchers created these simplified little micro-worlds, like this world of blocks. Inside this tiny, controlled universe, a program could learn to see and plan and act without all the messiness of reality. And it led to some really impressive demos. But the big problem was, the solutions they found here often just fell apart when you tried to apply them to the real world. But this whole period of struggle, this AI winter, it led to a massive aha moment that completely changed the course of the field. People realized the secret to powerful AI wasn't just a smarter algorithm. It was knowledge. Deep, specific knowledge about a particular subject. And that one insight led directly to expert systems, which became AI's first big commercial success. The process was pretty straightforward. First, you'd sit down with a human expert, say a doctor, and capture all their knowledge. Then, you'd painstakingly encode that knowledge into hundreds of simple if-then rules. And finally, a reasoning engine could just apply those rules to new problems. And often, it could perform just as well as, or even better than, a person. And that really brings us to the modern era. Because the big lesson from the AI winters and the limits of expert systems was that trying to handcraft all that knowledge just doesn't work. It's brittle and it's impossible to scale. The field realized that AI systems needed to learn from experience, from data, just like we do. And that shifted the entire focus from trying to build AI in isolation to integrating it with other fields. And this quote from David McAllister in '98 just nails that shift perfectly. The new way of thinking wasn't about inventing intelligence from scratch in a vacuum. It was about grabbing the best tools from other disciplines. Machine learning teamed up with statistics. Reasoning about uncertainty borrowed heavily from probability. Today's AI isn't some rebellion against the past. It's built directly on all those hard-won lessons, especially the need to handle messy, uncertain, real-world data. So when you step back, you see this incredible journey of huge ambition, some really crushing disappointments, and then these powerful, game-changing breakthroughs. This cycle of boom and bust has defined AI from the very beginning. And that leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. Given this long, turbulent roller coaster of a history, what does its past really tell us about its future?